All right, ladies, welcome to the 8 weeks to wellness. I believe we are week 7. And today we're going to be discussing balancing hormones through nutrition and exercise. Now, in terms of getting down to business today, I'm just going to fully drop me out and you out. In terms of getting down to business today, one thing that I want to highlight is that with this information that I'm about to give you, I'm about to spit out a lot of different information. And so, with that, what I want you to take on board is that some of these things will be super applicable. Some of these things are going to feel like you are doing everything wrong. And so I want you to just really remember that we need to take things one step at a time, and chasing the perfect lifestyle for our hormones is largely unavailable and unreachable. But chasing an optimal lifestyle where more often than not we can look after our hormones and therefore, as a byproduct of that, look after our health, that's where we want to be aiming to get towards. Now, as someone who personally, it's Zoe here, as someone who just finished a prep, I was open with you guys on the last workshop that I'd lost my period about 3.5, 4 months ago. And that is a huge sign that our hormones are dysregulated. So I want to really highlight that embarking on a silly hobby journey that you are obsessed with, that might require, in terms of being an elite athlete, might require a period of discipline and neglecting your hormones. This is again where I do not want to be sort of pot calling the kettle black or being hypocritical at all. I understand we have ebbs and flows of our life where sometimes we're not going to be able to optimize absolutely everything. So, getting down to business today, I hope that you can take at least one grain from this and one little golden nugget to transform your hormones through your nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle. And I hope that there'll be a few sort of funny words that hopefully you've heard of before. But if you haven't and you've got more questions after you watch this, just shoot me a message and I am more than happy to give you more information. Now, let's get down to business. So, what if I told you that your fatigue, your cravings, your stubborn belly fat, your low libido, and your anxiety aren't actually a you problem, but they're a hormonal imbalance problem? When it comes to balancing our hormones, one of the most important things that we address is the fact that there are so many little hormones in our body, but we have something called the stress hormone highway. And so inside our beautiful bodies, this is also known as the HPA axis. So this is our hypothalamus, which is a little piece of or a little sort of region near the back of our brain, our pituitary gland, which is a gland right near that, and then our adrenal axis. So we want to think of our HPA axis as our brain talking to our adrenal glands, so letting us know when to produce adrenaline and freak out about that email, and basically constantly checking, are we safe? As females, this is really, really high wired because in terms of safety in Paleolithic times, we weren't always able to fight off the bears. And so instead, when it came to us being safe, our nervous systems were much more tightly wired to not sleep as heavy, okay? Especially when we are rearing children, we sleep a lot lighter so that we are aware of any sort of security breach or any sort of danger. And so with our adrenal glands and with our HPA axis, it's so much more sensitive than our male counterparts who sort of sleep right through the night like an absolute log. And then they wake up to only you maybe complaining about something. And they wake up and they go, oh, I slept straight through it. And with that, I want to just highlight that the constant checking of are we safe? When we know that this is how our body is wired, we can then nurture ourselves and create a beautiful environment for ourselves around this so that we can really look after ourselves. So when we are chronically stressed, this is where we're in a state of feeling unsafe. And so even a low level stress or something that could be deemed a quote unquote good stress, like training, dieting, being on the go, that sort of a thing, we have to remember that these stresses of training can quickly become overtraining. Dieting can quickly become under consuming enough nutrients. Being on the go, never knowing when to stop, and doom scrolling before bed, our system gets very easy overloaded. Now, when our HPA axis is dysregulated, our adrenals start to pump out too much cortisol, which throws off everything. So this can slow down your thyroid, which means fatigue, we're feeling a lot more exhausted, and it can also mean easy weight gain. Our ovulation can become irregular. And now it's important to note that with our ovulation, if we have a normal year, granted sort of things happen, life happens, whatnot, we can still have 1 to 3 non-ovulatory cycles a year. Now, this means that we can go through our say 28-day cycle hypothetically and not actually ovulate, so not actually be fertile around the middle of the cycle. And so ovulation becoming irregular, There's a one-off and an every so often when there's been a different stressor in your life. And then there's chronic irregularity with your ovulation, where your periods may be sometimes 45 days, sometimes 21 days, sometimes skip and not come at all until the 60-day mark again. Okay. And then we have to remember as well that when our HPA axis is dysregulated, our mood can tank, our digestion slows, and inflammation rises. And if you've been following along for what I feel like when I am holding on to excess water retention and inflamed, I feel like a water buffalo. And with that rise in inflammation, my morning walk, I feel like I'm huffing and puffing in it. My digestion, I eat my food and I'm like, why is my belly feeling so full for hours on end? And then with my mood, it's very easy, obviously, to swing the pendulum to lots of anxiety. You don't want to do anything else. It's really important to address that we are cyclical beings. We are not like our masculine energy counterparts. And when we act in that particular way, it usually causes our system to become overloaded, our nervous system to be thrown off, and our cortisol to be chronically high. Now, when it comes to high cortisol living versus low cortisol living, think of this as low regulated cortisol living. And I say this because our cortisol actually has peaks and troughs in the day that when they happen at correct sort of times, we're going to feel quite good throughout the day because cortisol actually gives us a rise in energy. A good example of this is a little bit of cortisol happening first thing in the morning. And so with that, that's where we get up and we gently have a rise of cortisol. We're about an hour after we've woken up. That's where we should be starting to feel a bit energized, ready to go. We then will often have one more or two more sort of rises in the day. And so with this, we then find that we can gradually decrease our cortisol and get down more so to a regular sort of night's sleep. But I'm going to explain the difference between high cortisol living and then also low/regulated cortisol living. Now, as you can see, when I've made this presentation, I've just noticed high cortisol living here actually lines up with these guys here. No, what's happened here? Oh God, I've mixed these two up. So I'm so happy this is recording right now and I can't crop this because there's two people watching. Now, having a look at this, I'm going to explain the two. So with high cortisol living, we'll often wake up tired but wired. And now what this means is sort of our fight or flight. We wake up, we're rearing to go. We're exhausted, but we can't get back to sleep. With high cortisol living, we train hard, but we never recover. So we're constantly on the go with our training. If we're not doing our weights workout, we're doing a HIIT workout. If we're not doing our HIIT workout, we're doing like hot yoga. We're always trying to put more stresses through our body. Okay. Then the next one for high cortisol living is coffee before water. And so this is something Soph and I have touched on previously before. Hydration before caffeination is key. When it comes to caffeine and it working, it basically blocks something called adenosine receptors. And so adenosine receptors help to basically regulate if we feel tired or if we feel energized. And what often happens is when we delay our first coffee in the morning by 60 to 90 minutes or our first little bit of caffeine, we can actually properly clear out our adenosine receptors so that they can respond better to the caffeine that we're having. Whereas when we have caffeine first thing and our adenosine receptors haven't had time to quote unquote clear out, this is where we can start to find that we have that little bit of a rush, but we tend to just have that exhaustion heading right through the day as well. Now, high cortisol living, craving sugar and salt constantly, hair thinning and hormonal breakouts. So these go hand in hand with dysregulated hormones when it comes to hunger hormones, blood sugar, but then also dysregulated hormones when it comes to hair thinning and breakouts. And that's very common as well. And something that we see with high cortisol living is we're constantly sort of wanting to have another little snacky. We need a stress regulation snacky. And what we actually need is stress regulation, period. Then another thing with high cortisol living is irregular or painful or non-existent periods, feeling anxious, snappy, or overwhelmed, and go, go, go energy masking burnout. Now, high cortisol living, to put it simply, is very, very similar to extreme dieting phase. And so a lot of what we may experience that we sort of see as normal, we end up doing for a much longer period of our life than intended, where we're constantly on edge, waking up, rushing to work, rushing to the next thing, and never actually taking a moment to sit, be present, and honor where our body and our mind and our nervous system is at. Now, low cortisol living, rest and regulating. So this is where on the flip side, we wake up and we feel refreshed and calm. There's no sense of urgency or a risk insecurity where we wake up, we're anxious, we're wired, and we've got to get going and moving. We train smart, but we also recover deeply. So we understand that we need 24 to 48 hours between each resistance training session to fully get the benefits and recover from that session, instead of pushing the limits and trying to get training done every single day of the week and feeling like if we're not moving, we're feeling some sort of a failure, which I can definitely say I've fallen into that boat many a times before. We then have hydration and protein first before we have our caffeine. Now, one thing that I do in the mornings is I actually make a little bit of a bulletproof. And so a bulletproof is a coffee with extra little bits and bops of ingredients in it. And one of my key ingredients is collagen. Now, collagen is a really easily absorbable form of protein. And so what I'll often do with my first coffee in the morning, I'll actually make it a decaf. And what I'll do is I might put some medicinal mushrooms in it. So this would typically be my cordyceps mushroom and lion's mane mushroom. I'll put a little bit of L-theanine in it, which helps to regulate stress levels and slow down any sort of a potential fast rise from caffeine. L-theanine is found in high concentrations in our matcha and then also in our green tea. So it naturally occurs there, but you can also supplement with additional if you are someone who prefers more of a clean energy from your caffeine. Then we have stable blood sugar and fewer cravings. I don't know about you, but I love being able to have breakfast in the morning and then being able to get about my day and not fussing, feeling irritable, feeling snappy, seeing every bakery that I walk past and thinking I need to have that. Okay, and instead being able to get all the way to lunch, whether that be at 12 p.m., whether that be at 2 p.m., and then be like, okay, I'm ready for my next meal. Instead of having our breakfast, which usually this is where the oats party comes in. Everyone loves their little protein oats for breakfast, which is just a blood sugar nightmare. And what happens is we have these and we end up feeling satisfied for maybe the next hour. Then, just because of the lack of fiber and typically a lack of nutrients, even though we are hitting our macros, our protein, carbs, and fats, we're not getting a lot of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants in that first meal when we are having a sweet meal instead of a savory one. And so what often happens is within about 60 to 90 minutes, we need that second coffee. We need that snack. Give it 2 or 3 hours, you are angry if you don't have that snack. That's not normal. And so it's really important when it comes to stable blood sugar and fewer cravings. A super easy way to help to regulate our nervous system around this is a savory breakfast. We then, of course, have healthy hair, skin, nails, and cycles. And then we have, in terms of feeling grounded and emotionally steady, we're able to think a little bit more clearly. We're able to look after ourselves and our own emotions first. And instead of reacting, we are more proactive. We take a moment, we think, and we act in alignment with the best version of ourselves because we're not feeling triggered and in that fight or flight state that causes us to act in a sense of urgency. And then last but not least, we live in that cyclical energy that honors our rhythms. Not every week needs to be a balls to wall work hard as I possibly can week. You're going to have periods of time where over the course of weeks or a few months, you might be working on a particular project that requires that go-go energy. But there will always be a price to pay. And so when we can bring ourselves back to our cyclical nature and appreciate that we're going to have times where intuitively we have so much creative energy in us that we want to lean into, so much that we want to give to other people. And then we're going to have other times where we want to retreat, we want to recharge, and we need to honor that instead of ignoring it and seeing that as a sign of weakness, that we need to actually refill our batteries, refill our cups up before we go giving our energy out to everyone else again. So if you haven't been able to tell from what I've just explained, high cortisol is survival mode, okay? It's not a sustainable way to live. Regulated cortisol helps to support our metabolism, our hormones, and our nervous system so that our bodies can thrive. Now, with nervous system regulation, this is something I touched on before, and it is really my secret sauce. There are so many ways we can balance our nervous system, and I don't think that any one way, excuse me, is really better than the next. That was a really gross clear of my throat. Sorry, guys. I don't think any one way is really better than the next. I think they all get to work in synergy and in tandem with each other. And so with that, there's a few ones that I've suggested here that I really think that when we can tap into this and know just how easy it is to honor these, we can create some beautiful balance in our lives and in our days to move forward. Now, the first one is walking in nature. And with walking in nature, nature is full of negative ions, okay? And now negative ions are sort of like electrical currents. Before you think this is really woo-woo, okay, think about how your phone is connected to your Wi-Fi, and the way that your phone is able to communicate with everyone else is from a big satellite up in the sky that it connects to through no string. There's no two cans with a string tied in the middle of this. It is energetic magnetic frequency. And so with negative ions negative ions on the Earth, we typically find these in higher concentration in nature, in mountains, and around the ocean. Okay, we want to think moving nature. So a little bit of windy trees or a little bit of a rough ocean, and that will be so rich with negative ions. Now, what happens is positive ions start to build up in our body, and positive ions are byproducts of sort of, again, the EMFs around our room, around our lifestyle, everything between. And positive ions also in high concentrations can increase inflammation in the body. So when you know that decreasing inflammation is as simple as walking barefoot at the beach, is as simple as sitting at the park, you know that in terms of a stressful day and being able to drop yourself down into that regulated space, you are potentially a 15-minute journey away from starting that process. Then we have breath work. And so with breath work, there are many different ways to do breath work. We can practice it intentionally, where we choose to sit down and dedicate a period of 10, 15, 45 minutes. But the most important thing with our breath work is that we know we can apply it right now. There are two things. So there's 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And when we think of this, it's as simple as a 4-second inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 6-second exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, what happens with our breath work is that when we are focusing on inhaling and when we are typically in a fight or flight state, we're taking more shallow breaths. So we're not breathing as deeply and oxygenating our body as deeply, getting rid of all that excess carbon monoxide deeply. What we're doing is we're taking shallow breaths. And whenever we take shallow breaths and more inhales, and whenever we inhale, we actually increase the speed of our heart rate. When we exhale, we decrease the speed of our heart rate. So this is where with heart rate variability, you'll notice that your heart rate is not the same throughout the day. So it's not just a strict 52 beats, 60 beats. It oscillates up and down within a range throughout the day. But when it's oscillating at that higher pump rate more chronically, you're going to find that you run into more issues where it's more difficult for you to do things because you're not taking that deep relaxation breath that helps to regulate your nervous system and balance your cortisol. 3 is saying no to that extra HIIT class when you're already burnt out. And so what I want you to remind yourself of, we have our 3 workouts. That is all you need alongside your steps to succeed. But one thing that we often do is we often want to sometimes move our body and do a bit more. Now, there's a difference between wanting to move our body because it feels good and knowing that we need to also balance a little bit of regulation and recovery. And maybe even though we want to move our body because it feels good, it might not always be the best decision. We need to remember that sometimes when we're going to that extra class, when we're going to that extra spin class, HIIT class, Barry's, all of that, we need to ask ourselves, am I going because I'm trying to become someone that requires me to burn myself out? And so you need to ask yourself, am I doing this HIIT class because I want to push my body and I want to nourish my body? Or am I doing this because I want to punish my body? And I feel like I don't have the same amount of self-worth if I avoid this class. Then 4th, we have cold exposure. And so with cold exposure, notice that I said only when your body is nourished. When we are in a state of dysregulation, we're in fight or flight, heart's beating very fast, okay? You know when someone goes to touch you or brush up against you and you're almost like a scared raccoon in the night. This was how I likened it in my prep. You're almost like a scared raccoon in the night. Someone goes to touch you and you just want to back up like a Tonka truck. You're like, do not touch me. Okay, we have to remember that when we're in a fight or flight state and our nervous system is dysregulated, when we pop ourselves into a cold plunge or an ice bath, sometimes this can further send us into dysregulation and fight or flight. So what is important is that when you are practicing your cold exposure, it's fantastic for helping to train you and strengthen that muscle that regulates your nervous system. But if you go into a cold exposure, you're already wired, you're already extremely stressed. If you don't know how to regulate yourself in that cold exposure, you're going to come out far worse off than you went in. Now, the important thing is that before going into a cold exposure, you set your intention with yourself. I'm aware this is going to be cold and my nervous system and my body may freak out for a moment. But my mind, I know I'm absolutely fine. I'm safe, I'm nourished, and I know that I'm in complete control here. I'm going to get in and I'm going to practice calming my mind and taking deep, nourishing breaths. That is what we need to do when we're using our cold exposure for a tool to regulate our nervous system instead of just send it light years the other way. Now, next thing I want to touch on is masculine energy and androgen dominance. Now, androgynous hormones are male-driven hormones or masculine hormones. And so the easiest way to put it is the hustle, okay? The girl boss energy, the boss babe. If you're always stuck in hustle mode, always doing, achieving, grinding, and suppressing your emotions to get through each day, you may be leaning into your masculine energy quite hard. Now, biologically, this shows up as androgen dominance. So what you may find when you are leaning into your masculine energy, this is where when our androgynous hormones begin to elevate and stay chronically elevated, we can start to experience acne along our jawline or on our back. We can start to experience hair thinning on the top of our head and facial hair growing around our beard and our jawline. That's not something that we want. And then we can also start to experience irregular cycles. We can start to experience aggression or intense drive followed by deep burnout. And I know that's going to hit some of you hard when you hear the intense drive followed by deep burnout, where it's a sign that we have ignored our cyclical nature and we have pushed ourselves into the ground hard and forgotten to actually recover and rest and flow and recharge along the way. So often what we find is that with our high stress state, we can end up developing insulin resistance. And this means that we struggle to tolerate our carbs properly when we consume them and regulate our blood sugar. This also means that we start to have more of those cravings and more of those sort of angry moments between meals. We also then, because of our dysregulated blood sugar and our inability to utilize our carbohydrates properly, we start to crave them more and more. And instantly you've gone from being the wellness girly wanting a steak and eggs to the wellness girly lining up at the bakery like, all I am is craving sweets. I am part sweet, part craving. So we need
Did you say insulin resistance? Is that what you said? Okay, I didn't hear and I was like, am I thinking about the same thing?
Yeah.
All right, good.
And then we have overtraining and under recovery. And so we need to remember as well that leaning into that hustle, that grind, when we don't honor the fact that as cyclical beings, as women, throughout the course of a typical menstrual cycle, we have periods of retreat and recovery. But even if you do not have a regular menstrual cycle now, there will still be times where you need to honor that rest and recovery. But oftentimes we can look at our calendar and we can say, but today is leg day. Today is upper body day. Like today I have this really important, so much on, I can't move anything. And we need to remember that our overtraining, overstimulating, overworking, and under recovery, we need to be able to remember that we need to balance in our recovery, whether that means going for a walk in the morning. That's one of my favorite mindful activities without our headphones, giving you a moment to actually listen, to be heard from yourself. And then with recovery, it can be as simple as when I get home, I'm not going to doom scroll on my phone. I'm going to plug it in, I'm going to have dinner, and I'm going to read my book for a little bit. So we need to remember that sometimes when we are in a really busy calendar period, we're in that heavy masculine energy, we need to remember that we need to lean hard into filling our cup back up and that heavy feminine energy so we can be feeling balanced, recovered, and make sure that our hormones are regulated in the way that they need to. And then, of course, last but not least, a sign of androgen dominance is suppressed ovulation, which can be low progesterone and unbalanced testosterone. So when you're experiencing any of these symptoms, you may not have a cycle at all, or you may have extremely delayed cycles. And so this is also known as hypothalamic amenorrhea, where it's delay or loss of cycle for sort of more than 6 months. And so with this, suppressed ovulation is often very common in those women who feel, again, masculine energy, hustle to the bone 5 or 6 days a week with work. Then we're training our absolute asses off. We're eating our meal prep. We're prepping for a competition. Every single natural athlete will have hormonal disruptions as she gets leaner leading towards the show. So it's extremely common that even if you aren't doing a bodybuilding prep, but instead you're just someone who you may have been sort of chronically dieting for quite a few years, or you may be one of those people who tends to diet really well, but the moment the diet stops, it's all hell break loose. I missed pasta, I missed burgers, I missed drinking with the girls, all that sort of a thing. And we create this imbalance in our life. And with that, it's really important to remember that your habits that you were doing now, they could be all better, which is fantastic. But the habits that may have preceded your current ones, depending on the duration of them, it can take months, sometimes years to recover. For my girls to recover getting off hormonal birth control or restoring their menstrual cycle once they continue eating a bit more, training a bit less, one thing that I have to remind them often is it can take between 6 months, okay, for the lucky ones, and 3 years to actually regulate your menstrual cycle naturally. So we need to remember, and that's the supplements too, that the habits we are doing now, sometimes we can be met with frustration. I am resting more. I am honoring myself more. If you're stressing yourself out about things not arriving on the time that they should, it can just drive you deeper and deeper into that hole of distrust, dysregulation, and the body just fighting back hard. So remember that all of your habits today lead to a beautiful tomorrow. And when it comes to hoping things come on time and in their calendar, that's very masculine energy of you. And I hear you, because we have deadlines, and I'm the exact same with a lot of things as well. But we need to remember, when we are honoring our flow, everything will come right as we need it to. So the top 10 hidden ways women can be wrecking their hormones to look skinny, but can actually be slowing down their body. Now, I hope that you guys look at these and you see these as past habits of yours and not current ones. But if any of these stick out as being enough current ones, then it's a sign to focus on one at a time and really give your all to just making that little habitual change each day. So 1 is skipping breakfast or having coffee on an empty stomach. Remember what I said, you can make a little decaf bulletproof, and you can pop a little bit of collagen in that. You can pop some MCT oil in that for some proteins and fats, and this can help to regulate your cortisol. Overtraining and doing cardio instead of lifting weights. This can deplete progesterone and obviously spike your cortisol as well. All of these can spike your cortisol, so I might just not say that every time. And then we have number 3, low-fat diets. Our hormones are made from cholesterol, and it's really important to remember that healthy cholesterol is good for us. If you're getting cholesterol from a deep-fried chicken schnitty, it's probably not the best. If you're getting cholesterol from some free-range or pasture-raised eggs, okay, some grass-fed, good quality meat, you're actually going to be fueling healthy hormones and fueling a healthy balance of hormones. Now, the body fat that's on our body is also known as an endocrine regulator, okay, a hormonal regulator. So when it comes to low-fat diets, but also having low body fat on us, this can often cause dysregulation to our hormones, making it more difficult for us to keep body fat down, more difficult for us to build any new muscle tissue, let alone bone density, and maintain the current bone density we might have. But then we also just feel shit, okay? So there is a reason why having more fat in your diet and ensuring that you are eating enough and you have enough body fat is all integral to making sure that your body can thrive. We then have overuse of artificial sweeteners and gums. Now, these disrupt our gut health and hormonal conversion. When it comes to artificial sweeteners and gums, I am certainly not perfect. Again, having just been in a bodybuilding prep where calories get quite low, you get a little bit of a sweet tooth. There is something to be said with that, where if you've got the car gum, this was something I was guilty of until I had to remove all my artificial sweeteners towards the end of the competition, because my gut started really having some issues with it. The car gum, where you have a piece of gum every time you get in the car. Okay, you've got the handbag or the purse gum, you got the desk gum. Okay, all of this. There is no need, and it can actually wreck your teeth. So there's a good podcast that I will share with you guys as well in terms of functional dentistry, and it showcases the benefit of saliva and how that actually helps to build and strengthen the enamel in our teeth, and how obviously chewing gum, because when we chew gum, our digestive enzymes start to get produced in our mouth. This can actually degrade the enamel on our teeth and can make our teeth worse off, less white and less strong. We then have fragranced beauty products and toxic candles and cleaning sprays. Okay, hormonal saboteurs, they are endocrine disrupting chemicals, and this is where easy swaps I have included in the menstrual cycle workshop. I think I sent through a little thing in notes to you guys. If not, I have a little sort of low tox your home note that I've written that has a little checklist of things you can chop and change. In terms of fragranced beauty products, what I personally use is I just use essential oils. Now, I'm very easy to please. The essential oil that's my favorite is vanilla. And so when it comes to using products on my face, on my body, and in my house, it's very easy. All of the stuff that I buy is sulfate-free, paraben-free, all that jazz. But as well as that, when it comes to smelling nice, when it comes to hydrating my skin, I'm very simple girl. I just use extra virgin olive oil for moisturizer and vanilla essential oil for a bit of scent. Okay. Then we have not pooping daily. So this slows the detoxification process. And when we aren't pooping daily, we need to remember that sometimes we can actually reabsorb not only the calories from our food, but also reabsorb the toxins that we are meant to be getting rid of outside of our body, expelling outside of our body. So we need to remember that not pooping daily slows down our detoxification processes. And this can also mean we're storing excess estrogen. We then have our plastic containers. So BPA often mimics estrogen in the body, which again, when we start to have excess estrogen, we can start to bump into a lot of similar symptoms that we bump into when we have high androgynous hormones. So we start to get the acne, we start to get the fatigue, is irregular cycles, painful cycles. And then we have not eaten enough carbs. So of course we have not eaten enough fats, which I've already touched on, but we also go, you've got to eat your carbs. Now, with your luteal phase and carbohydrates, we are less insulin sensitive around our luteal phase. So depending on how your body responds, you may respond better with more carbs around your luteal phase or less. The important thing to note is that your brain is a glycolytic organ. And this means that your brain uses carbohydrates. Now, optimally, the brain will use a minimum of 130 grams of carbohydrates a day. But if you are stressed, your brain can burn an additional 1,100 calories per day purely from stress. And imagine the havoc that wreaks on your body, the dysregulation with your energy levels when you're trying to constantly restrict your carbohydrates in your foods, instead of honoring that your body actually needs them to perform just at a base level. Before you chuck in the training, your body needs them to perform optimally. Then we chuck in the fact your resistance training requires carbohydrates as well, same thing. Now, last but not least, we have wearing the strong woman who doesn't need to rest badge, okay? Now, when it comes to females, we can often put ourselves on the pedestal that we are Amara, we do everything for everyone, no one ever does enough for us, and often that is a cause of something that we have created in our lifestyle, which I hate to say it, I know people hate to hear it, but the strong woman who doesn't need rest, we need to remember that we actually, in order to recharge, we need to honor our rest. We need to honor our cycles, our softness, and the fact that we do require support, and that's okay. And when it comes to regulating our cycle, optimizing our body so that we can look our best, feel our best, and perform our best, this requires rest. So when it comes to honoring that as well, I want you to ask yourself coming into this week, where your intuition pings saying, God, I'm doing a lot. Where can you pull up and say, I am doing a lot. So today I'm going to nourish myself by doing XYZ instead, or XYZ as well. So for me, it's popping my phone away that little bit earlier so I can honor my sleep and get enough beauty ZZZs. Now, we need to remember what it costs us long term. And if we keep ignoring the whispers from our body, they will eventually start to scream. Unbalanced hormones left unchecked can lead to PCOS, which affects 10 to 20% of women, hypothyroidism, infertility, anxiety and depression, premature aging, which we do so much. We take our hair, skin and nails, we drink the bone broth. Like if premature aging, we need to regulate our stress. And then we have gut dysfunction and loss of identity and feminine radiance. I don't know about you, but having lost my period, both times I competed, I can confidently say once the cycle leaves, there is a sense of grayness and a sense of just not as much color. That's the easiest way I can put it. And it's something that when it comes to identity and leaning into the woman that you know you are, that is strong and powerful, but also firm in her ground and knows who she is, knows how to honor herself, that is one of the things we want to make sure when we know what that feels like, that becomes our new benchmark. So the new standard is a balanced, radiant, and powerful woman. So I want you to think about this week. When you're eating your meals for nourishment, not depletion. You're lifting weights to get stronger, to build your bone density, and to be that strong old lady that doesn't need a wheelchair. And when she falls over, she simply lands in a push-up position and pushes herself back up. Rest like it's your job, because you deserve to be honored and you deserve to have the effort required to organize your rest so that you can perform and function at your best and be regulated. Remember, with herbs and essential oils, it's not a vanilla body spray, it's vanilla essential oils. When it comes to our natural scents, often we can be drawn to very artificial ones because they do smell really good. They're literally synthesized in a lab to smell really good, so we want to smell more of them. But they're not what smells healthy. And so I want you to remind yourself of that. Honor your cycles instead of fighting them. So if this means honoring the slug in your luteal phase, which I've touched on before, or if you're someone trying to restore their cycle, honoring the fact that maybe you do need the extra rest, maybe you do need the extra food today. Honor it instead of fighting it. And then trust that the more that you align with your intuition and the more that you align with your feminine energy and your rhythm, trust that it will guide you in the right direction. And the more that you know who you are as a balanced, radiant, and powerful woman, the more that your intuition will be able to guide you in the right direction. And you can trust that your rhythm will always send you on the right path. Remember, you don't have to choose between being strong and being soft. And I hope I get to highlight that for you guys as well. You can be a balance of both. And that is firm in knowing who you are, where you get to unlock that version of you. So ask yourself this, coming into this weekend, am I operating from fear of gaining weight, or am I operating from love for my body and its long-term health? The version of you who is balanced, radiant, strong, and well, she doesn't emerge from burnout. She emerges from nourishment, regulation, and restoration. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I could talk all day about nervous system regulation. I absolutely love it. And if you guys have any questions, I will keep the recording going and let them out.
I love that it's just us, so it's all the questions.
There's someone else with iPhone in here too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Hello, iPhone. I'm just going to stop recording. That's okay.
Who's this